Ethan's Revenge. I walked into my own funeral on a rainy Thursday morning in rural Tennessee. Not literally, of course, but it felt that way. My name's Eric Lane, 45, former paramedic, now running logistics at a private ambulance company. I'd taken 3 days off to bury my brother in Montana. Cancer. Fast and cruel. And when I got back, everything I knew was gone. My nameplate had been removed from the office door. My security badge didn't work. And when I finally got in, thanks to a janitor I'd trained 6 months ago, my desk was cleared. My photos, my files, my chair, gone. Instead, I found a younger guy sitting there. Button-down shirt, smug smile, Starbucks cup. He looked up at me like I was the intruder. "Can I help you?" he asked. I just stood there for a second, soaked from the rain, backpack still on. "Where's Janet?" I asked. "My boss." "She's not in today," he said slowly. I was told this office was vacant. I didn't yell, didn't throw a fit, just turned around, walked to my truck, and sat there until the wipers stopped squeaking. 10 minutes later, I got the email. From HR. "Your position has been restructured. Effective immediately. Please contact us to discuss transition options." No call, no meeting, no dignity. After 16 years. They didn't even wait until I got back from my brother's funeral. I went home to an empty house. Not because I live alone, but because my wife was at her sister's and my daughter was staying with a friend. That wasn't unusual. Not anymore. Something in our family had been eroding for a while. Quietly, like rot under a floorboard. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a bottle of bourbon I'd been saving since 2015. The occasion was supposed to be happy. Retirement, maybe. A big promotion. Something earned. Instead, I drank it alone while scrolling through my bank app. And noticed something strange. 3 withdrawals I didn't recognize. 200 here. 650 there. 1,000 last week. All marked, transfer to shared account. But I only had one joint account, with my wife. I checked hers. Empty. Then I logged into the home security system. The one I installed myself. Playback showed a man I didn't recognize walking through my garage. Unlocking my workshop with my spare key. Carrying something out. My father's tools. Antique wrenches. A compass from my grandfather's Navy service. Gone. And there was my wife, helping him. Smiling. That's when I stopped being shocked. And started making a plan. Not a plan for confrontation. Not yet. But a plan for proof. For leverage. I opened a new notebook. Wrote 3 words across the top. Track. Record. Wait. Because I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. And I sure as hell wasn't going to lose quietly. They took my job. They tried to take my legacy. But they didn't realize who they were dealing with. I don't start wars. But I end them. By sunrise, I was already in motion. No calls. No messages. No warning. Just a quiet exit from the house I'd paid for. To track down the truth they thought I'd never see. At work, I designed our dispatch software. Built it with redundancy, audit trails, and hidden admin layers. Not for spying, but for protection. When you deal with medical emergencies, chaos is the enemy. I'd learned to plan for everything. That instinct was still sharp. Even now, I drove out to the old storage unit on the edge of town. A place I hadn't visited in months. I kept a backup laptop there. Old but secure. Encrypted drives. And most importantly, the access codes. My digital skeleton key. By noon, I was back online. And inside the dispatch system. Nothing flashy. No breaking firewalls. Just slipping in through maintenance portals I designed myself before they tried to erase me. They'd already started deleting my credentials. But not fast enough. I pulled activity logs from the past 90 days. Scanned for anomalies. Patterns. Anything unusual. And I found it. One name, Kyle Brennan, had started appearing in sensitive systems 2 weeks before my brother died. I'd never heard of him. He wasn't in dispatch. Not in HR. But he'd been granted elevated access, quietly. Same day my vacation was approved. His permissions overlapped mine. And his login was used to approve my termination restructure, hours before I even boarded my flight to Montana. That wasn't coincidence. That was timing. I pulled his employee file. Nothing came up. No records. No background check. Just a stub account created by Jay Whitmore, our new CFO. I'd met Whitmore once. Briefly. Sharp suit. Cold eyes. Talked like he was allergic to blue-collar sweat. Said he was brought in to optimize margins. Translation: cut corners, gut teams, and repackage the company for sale. I searched further. Found a recent vendor edition, Northridge Transport Solutions. On paper, they supplied new ambulance fleet tracking. In reality, they were billing triple for GPS units we'd already owned for years. The signer? K. Brennan. With Whitmore's digital approval. It clicked. They weren't just replacing me. They were laundering money through vendor shell companies, gutting internal oversight, and they needed me gone before I noticed. Too late for that now. I downloaded every file. Logs, approval chains, vendor invoices, stored them on a separate drive. Then I did something even colder. I logged into the private admin console, a tool I'd built, never documented, and set up a mirrored system. Every change they made from this moment on, backed up remotely, encrypted, traceable. They thought firing me erased their trail, but I always leave a back door. And now I was inside again, quietly, waiting, watching, because the best revenge doesn't come loud. It comes documented, and with receipts. By the end of that week, I knew more about Kyle Brennan than his own HR file did, because it didn't exist. Not really. His digital presence inside the company had been manufactured hours before my access was revoked. But outside, the trail was messy. 2 different addresses listed on public records. 3 LLCs tied to his name. All of them linked to a consulting firm that had shut down the same month Whitmore took over as CFO. And one of those LLCs? The registered owner of Northridge Transport Solutions, the shell company billing us for phantom GPS units. They hadn't just set me up to fail. They'd cleared the field, planted their own guy, and started rerouting cash the moment I was off the grid. I didn't rage. I archived, filed everything under 2 categories: operational fraud and personal targeting. Every email, every vendor invoice, every access log with Brennan's name on it. I created a cold dossier. No emotions, no commentary. Just dates, names, actions. And then I turned inward. Home. The place where betrayal had started to leak through the floorboards. My wife hadn't asked once about the job. Not when I stopped leaving the house. Not when my badge was deactivated. She just adjusted her schedule. Spent more time out. Nights away became weekends. I didn't question it. I watched. Our home security system fed live footage to my laptop. Not just the garage, but the office, kitchen, and back door, places I knew she thought were blind spots. Monday night, 8:14 p.m. A man in a gray hoodie entered through the back patio. She let him in. They didn't speak much. Just familiarity. The kind that doesn't need words. He stayed 47 minutes. Left with a box. My box. One of the crates marked Eric's tools, Dad's stuff. I knew the handwriting. She followed him out, hugged him, then looked around, scanned the yard, the windows. She was checking for cameras, but I'd hidden the lens behind the gutter bracket. I recorded everything, not to confront her, not yet, but because I needed the truth. Undeniable, time-stamped, documented. Same way I handled cardiac misdiagnosis cases in the field, no assumptions. Just facts, confirmed in triplicate, ready to present in court if needed. This was no different. That night, I sat in the dark living room, listening to the quiet hum of betrayal echoing through the walls. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I added a new folder to my archive. Domestic intelligence. Because the war wasn't just corporate anymore. It was personal, and I'd stopped losing the moment I stopped reacting. The first external move was never going to be loud. I wasn't going to storm offices or threaten lawsuits. That's what people expect. That's what they prepare for. I operate in blind spots. I reached out to a former colleague, someone who owed me, and who still had access to Meridian's internal expense approvals. I didn't ask questions. I just sent a list. 8 vendor names. 3 email addresses. 2 purchase order sequences. He didn't reply. He knew better. But 2 days later, I received a nondescript envelope in my P.O. box. Inside were 6 printed spreadsheets. No headers. No explanations. But the data was clear. Over $300,000 in overpayments approved under Whitmore's authority, each tied to Northridge Transport Solutions or its sister entities. Some routed through Brennan. Some masked under infrastructure refresh codes I used to authorize myself. They were using my legacy to cover fraud. That's the kind of insult you don't scream about. You outlive it. I added the spreadsheets to the archive, then backed it up again twice. One to a secured drive, the other to an encrypted cloud drop keyed to my fingerprint. If they wiped me out tomorrow, the files would still speak. And speaking of voices, hers had gone quiet. My wife. No texts, no calls, not even logistics. Just a quiet vacuum where a marriage used to be. I didn't chase it. I simply tracked the behavior. Tuesday morning, her location pinged in a part of town she never visited. A low-rise apartment complex near the industrial park. She stayed for 2 hours. Returned home, smiling. Later that night, I tested something. Left a flash drive labeled Photos, Montana, in the drawer where I kept our old trip backups. Watched on the camera feed as she picked it up. Hesitated. Slipped it into her purse. It didn't contain photos. It contained decoy logs, fake vendor trails, forged access credentials, and a red herring suggesting I was the one manipulating Meridian's books. She was going to use it. I needed her to, because that would mean she was deeper than I thought. And the more she revealed herself, the less I had to do. By Thursday, she was gone again. The gray hoodie man's truck parked outside our house for 10 minutes. She loaded something into his cab, left with him, didn't return until midnight. I didn't ask where she'd been. I made coffee, sat by the window, wrote 4 lines in my notebook. Brennan's paper trail complete. Whitmore's shell companies verified. Internal whistleblower activated. Wife compromised. Unknown depth. Then I stared at the last one, underlined it, because that was no longer speculation. That was intel. And when intel's verified, it becomes leverage. The trap doesn't snap when the prey steps in. It closes when they think they've already won. That Friday morning, I received a text from my wife. Just 6 words. Can we talk tonight? Just us. I didn't respond. Instead, I added a new line to the notebook, testing boundaries. Expect manipulation. She arrived home earlier than usual. No makeup. Sweater I hadn't seen in years. The one she used to wear on Sundays when we still had breakfast together. She cooked dinner. Set the table for 2. Soft music. Wine. All the markers of someone trying to rewind a marriage or distract from the ending of one. I played along. Listened. She talked about distance, about losing track of us, about outside pressures. Never mentioned the man in the truck. Never mentioned the box she stole. But her voice cracked once, when she said, "I know you've been hurting." That part was true. I'd just buried it deeper than she knew. After dinner, she cleared the plates, said she was glad we could reconnect. Kissed me goodnight like it was 2015. But when she went upstairs, I walked into the garage, opened the utility cabinet. The flash drive I planted, the decoy, was gone. She'd taken it. And now I knew for certain. She wasn't just involved. She was trying to build a case. Against me. By morning, I had a plan. First, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Marcus. Old friend. Now a compliance analyst at a regional bank that handled some of Meridian's transactions. I sent him a message. 3 words. Off record. Brennan. Urgent. He replied with a location. Neutral ground. We met in a diner off the interstate. No names. Just coffee and code. I handed him a printout. Transaction flow. Company names. Addresses. Signatures. He didn't ask where I got it. He just whistled under his breath and said, "These guys are dirty, but not smart." That was enough. Marcus would start feeding it up the ladder. Quietly. No subpoenas. Just pressure from within. My next step? Activate the whistleblower failsafe. The one I'd prepared the moment I suspected my wife might flip on me. I compiled everything into a secure drive, labeled and organized for federal review. Attached a letter from me, stating I was terminated after raising internal concerns about vendor fraud. I didn't send it. I handed it to my lawyer. A veteran. Ex-JAG. No patience for corporate games. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded. And locked it away under attorney-client privilege. "If anything happens to me," I said, "you know what to do." He nodded again. And that was that. I drove home in silence. Storm clouds overhead. The kind that don't announce themselves with thunder. The kind that smother and soak everything quietly. Like betrayal. Or revenge. Or both. The first hit came quietly. Monday, 6:42 a.m. My phone buzzed with a notification from the encrypted mirror I'd set up on Meridian systems. Someone tried to purge vendor logs. Failed. They didn't know the archive existed. And even if they did, they couldn't access it. The logs showed the attempt came from a terminal assigned to K. Brennan. He was sweating. That meant Whitmore was sweating. And pressure always reveals structure. By 9:15, Marcus texted again. His compliance team had flagged 2 irregular wire transfers tied to Northridge, both routed through a secondary entity owned by an overseas subsidiary. Sloppy. Rushed. Cracks in the wall. Meanwhile, at home, the performance continued. My wife cooked again. Asked about new opportunities. Told me she'd scheduled us for couples therapy. She was trying to redirect the narrative. Make herself the reconciler. The fixer. But the camera feed told a different story. That same afternoon, the man in the gray hoodie, now confirmed as Kyle Brennan, pulled into our driveway in a different vehicle. No plates on the front. Rear one covered in mud. He stayed for 7 minutes. She handed him something in a brown envelope. I watched from the security app as they spoke near the garden gate. She looked over her shoulder twice. She was nervous. She should have been, because I'd already cloned her phone. A week ago, silently mirrored every text, call, voicemail to a secure inbox. At 10:03 that night, she sent Brennan a message. I planted the drive. If he finds out, I'll say I was manipulated. Stick to the story. That line said everything. There was no miscommunication. No confusion. She was in it, fully. So I made a decision. The kind that changes a man. I uploaded a time-stamped compilation to an offline drive. Everything, vendor fraud, Brennan's planted access, internal manipulation, the video of him taking my father's tools. And then I added one more file, the recorded message from my wife. The one about being manipulated. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about precision. I dropped the drive at a law firm that handled whistleblower protection cases, anonymously. A courier service. Untraceable. 2 hours later, a partner from the firm called my lawyer. Said they were very interested. I didn't celebrate. I went for a run. For miles through quiet roads, under a sky that hadn't broken yet. Because storms don't always come with lightning. Sometimes they arrive like this. Silent. Relentless. And irreversible. It started with a memo. Circulated quietly at Meridian's corporate office, addressed only to department heads. Effective immediately, CFO James Whitmore is placed on administrative leave pending internal review. They didn't say why. They never do. But that kind of silence only means one thing. The internal bleed was real. And someone high enough had decided to apply a tourniquet before the wound became public. At 10:22 a.m., I got a message from Marcus. You did it. They're moving fast now. But it wasn't done. Not even close. Because Brennan was still out there. And so was she. My wife. That evening, I returned home early. She was on the phone in the backyard. Speaking low. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. The call was already recording through the mirrored app. She was panicked. No, listen to me. He's not saying anything, but I feel it. He knows. He's just watching me like I'm a stranger. She paused. Then, no. I didn't tell him it was your idea. He still thinks I found the files on my own. Just figure out your exit. Okay. That was it. The moment. The final thread snapping. That night, I packed a small duffel bag. Took only what mattered. IDs, hard drives, my grandfather's watch. Left the ring on the nightstand. No note. No confrontation. Just gone. I booked into a short-term rental 20 miles out. Farmhouse. No neighbors. Burner phone. Clean signal. And then I sent the last file. Video. 32 seconds. Security footage of Brennan in our garage. Taking heirlooms. Wearing my sweatshirt. I sent it to one inbox only. Meridian Legal Counsel, Internal Investigations. No sender. Just the subject line. Look closer. The response came faster than expected. The next morning, Meridian issued a company-wide halt on all vendor payments tied to Northridge, Gravemont Logistics, and 2 others, all Brennan fronts. By noon, Brennan's access credentials were revoked. The email announcing it was polite, but the act was not. Because when you lose access in that world, you don't just lose a job. You lose protection. That same day, I received an encrypted voicemail from my lawyer. One line. Your file triggered a federal review. They want a formal statement. No press. No headlines. Just movement. Exactly how it needed to be. Meanwhile, my wife still hadn't called. Not once. She must have known the silence wasn't just distance anymore. It was conclusion. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was done. Sometimes the loudest statement a man can make is leaving everything behind and letting the wreckage speak for itself. The email came on a Wednesday morning. Unmarked, encrypted, signed with a federal key. Mr. Lane, we'd like to schedule an interview regarding material recently submitted to our agency under Whistleblower Code 81A. Your cooperation is appreciated. There was no drama, no threat, just presence. The kind of quiet that moves heavy doors. I confirmed with 2 words, available anytime. They sent a location, not a federal building, not an office. A neutral site 2 hours away. Industrial complex, back room, unmarked door. I didn't bring a lawyer. Didn't need one. Everything I had was clean, organized, verified. Inside, 2 agents waited. One led the interview. Calm, direct, sharp-eyed. The other watched everything, not just me, but the space around me. The way trained men do. They asked about the files, the connections, the shell companies. I gave them names, dates, timestamps, internal patterns, vendor matches, footage. They didn't ask how I got it. That told me they already knew. Then came the personal questions. My wife's involvement. Brennan's access to our home. I didn't editorialize. I gave facts, camera logs, data transfers, her messages, even the planted flash drive she thought would flip the story against me. One of the agents raised an eyebrow. The other just nodded slightly. After 90 minutes, they ended the session. No promises, no projections, just a final line from the lead agent. You've built a very clear picture. Thank you. And that was it. I walked out of the building into wind and gravel and silence. No applause, no relief, just air and space. By the next morning, Brennan was gone from every Meridian system. The man who replaced me, the one who took my chair, my office, my role, received a formal internal audit request. 5 years of transaction history. Every file touched. Every decision approved. He resigned within 48 hours. No explanation. None needed. 2 days later, I received a message from Marcus. A screenshot. Federal seizure order on Whitmore's assets. Property. Vehicles. Secondary accounts. They were moving. And when the government moves, it doesn't knock. It enters. And takes. That night, I stood on the porch of the farmhouse and watched headlights rise on a distant ridge. Not in fear. In calm. Because the war was never about proving myself. It was about exposing theirs. Their greed. Their manipulation. Their assumption that I was just another quiet man they could cut and forget. But I don't get loud. I get thorough. And now, they weren't facing me. They were facing the truth. And the truth never yells. It just arrives. They always think they'll talk their way out. That's what Whitmore tried first. His lawyer sent a letter. Clean, corporate. Offered cooperation in exchange for discretion. Translation, silence for money. I didn't respond. Not to them. But the Department of Justice did. Whitmore was indicted under 3 counts. Wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud a federal program, and falsifying financial records tied to federal reimbursement grants. It was surgical, public, and irreversible. Brennan vanished from the grid for 3 days, then surfaced through his attorney, offering testimony. Too late. The agents already had the full map, from my files, from Marcus, from the internal collapse Meridian could no longer hide. They had vendors, wire trails, device logs. They didn't need him. They used him. 2 months later, both men accepted plea deals. Whitmore got 10 years. Brennan, 6. Asset forfeiture. Federal restitution. Careers over. Reputations collapsed. And Meridian? They issued a public statement calling it a painful chapter in an otherwise forward-looking future. Painful for them, maybe. For me, it was closure. Then came the call from legal. A different tone. No threats. Just resolution. Meridian wanted to settle. Full payout for wrongful termination. Public acknowledgement filed quietly in court records. And a separate financial settlement to avoid exposure of certain practices beyond the fraud itself. They called it gesture of goodwill. I called it interest. I took the deal, not because I needed their money, but because it was mine. Earned in silence. Secured with facts. Paid in full. 3 weeks later, my wife filed for divorce. No apology. No confession. Just a clean petition with a custody clause. unnecessary, since we had no children. I signed. No contest. The settlement was even. She kept her name. I kept everything else. I didn't fight her. Didn't destroy her. I didn't have to. Because she had to live with what she became. And I had peace. Not joy. Not revenge. Just peace. A thing earned, not given. I left the farmhouse a month after the dust settled. Rented a cabin near the water. Still in Tennessee, but far enough from the old life that the air tasted different. I started running again. With trails. Early mornings. I bought a new notebook. The first page was blank. Intentionally. Because for the first time in over a year, there was nothing I needed to track. No one left to watch. No battle to prepare for. The war had ended. And I had walked away standing. A year passed. Not in noise. Not in milestones. Just in quiet. The kind of time you measure by shadows across the floor and how long it takes coffee to cool beside a journal. I didn't track anything anymore. Not accounts. Not movements. Not messages. I let it all go. Because the war ended, and the man who walked out of it wasn't the same one who walked in. That's how these things work. You don't come out stronger. You come out clear. Some nights I still replay the footage, not to relive it, but to remind myself why silence works. Why stillness is power. There's a reason animals freeze before striking. It's not fear. It's control. Control saved me. Not anger. Not screaming. Not vengeance. Control built the archive. Control buried the fraud. Control ended a marriage without a single threat. I never raised my voice. But I was heard. That was enough. People ask sometimes, what would you do differently? I say nothing. Because even the worst moments built the foundation for what followed. And what followed was mine. Unbought. Undictated. Unearned by anyone but me. I opened a small firm, just consulting. Quiet contracts. Risk analysis. I work alone. I choose who I deal with. No logos. No boardrooms. No corporate rot. I walk the woods in the mornings. I drink strong coffee with no distractions. I sleep. I sleep like a man who saw the storm come and didn't blink. Sometimes, when the wind's right, I think about her. About the lie she lived inside. About the man she let through our door. But it doesn't burn anymore. It just confirms something I already knew. People don't change under pressure. They reveal. Same with Whitmore. Same with Brennan. Same with every polished suit who thought quiet meant weak. They were wrong. Silence isn't absence. It's strategy. Stillness isn't surrender. It's aim. And when the time comes, the ones who've been still the longest hit the hardest. Now, I write when I want. Work when I choose. I keep my doors locked. Not out of fear, but because now everything inside those walls, my space, my peace, my name, is finally mine. And no one will take it again. So if you ever see someone watching quietly in the background, not raising their hand, not fighting for attention, not rushing to react, don't mistake that for weakness. You're looking at the most dangerous one in the room. Because some men fight back loud, and some, we just keep receipts. And we wait. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.